So, good morning, everyone.
Yeah.
Welcome to the first session of our two-part virtual workshop series on capital nourishment. So, today is our Understanding Capital session, where we'll be exploring, with the guidance of our friend Charity May here, the relationship with money, the types of capital, what options we might have, and what options might make the most sense for your business stage and your values. And I'll pass it on to Charity in a bit, but before we'll just do some introductions here. But feel free, Charity, to say hi, to unmute yourself, um, and greet folks. And then we'll go over some more in-depth introductions after. So
I'll
yeah,
just quickly say I'm first just thank you to the San Diego Food System Alliance for giving me the opportunity to meet with all of you on this topic that is near and dear to my heart. I'm very much looking forward to our conversation. Hopefully this will be more of a conversation and very interactive because I know you all are doing such incredible work here in San Diego, and I'm want this to be as generative for you as possible.
awesome. Thank you, Charity. Yeah, so let's get started here. Let's see, waiting room. I'll just do a brief overview of our time together here, starting now with this welcome, and I'll ask you all to introduce yourself in the chat in a minute. And then I'll briefly introduce the work that we are doing through the local food economy lab, especially for folks that are not as familiar with it. And then I'll have Charity come in with the Understanding Capital presentation, where she'll guide us over these topics and explore some case studies and scenarios and encouraging questions and interactions throughout the presentation. And then we'll close. We'll have some final announcements until we see each other on the next session on March 5th. So now we would love if you all could introduce yourself in the chat, adding your name, your business, or the organization you're representing here today, if you are. And then we would love to hear how you are arriving in the space today, what feelings come up with this topic, with this gathering, and I can share while giving you a moment to think and type down that I'm Hannah Schuler, and I'm with the San Diego Food System Alliance, and I'm arriving very excited for this new partnership with Charity and for this opportunity to be learning with you all. So yeah, I see folks listening. Hopeful, it's wonderful, Brandon. Curiosity, sure. What else? Take a moment to read in the chat. Lots of folks arriving curious. That's great. Excitement to learn. Multitasking is fine as well. I'm glad you're here, Ellie. Yeah, no worries, Ellie. If you can be on camera, we'll definitely encourage that. It would be wonderful. But if you're not, it's totally fine. We understand. Awesome. Awesome. Keep it coming. Thank you for introducing yourselves. And and I will keep us going so we can get started. Oh, all right. So these are some community agreements that I wanted to bring for us to keep in mind and embody while we are in this shared space together, discussing about this important and sometimes sensitive topic that is capital. So I'll invite you all to take a look. at what we have here, and if there's any specific agreement that is feeling particularly important for you today, for this time together, feel free to unmute yourself and say it out loud or put it in the chat. I'm going to highlight the ask questions and be curious one because I know the intention of this workshop is to be a very hands-on experience. So I want to encourage the participation here. Um, what else? Any specific agreement that is speaking louder here for folks today? I think adopting an abundance mindset is also really important, as this topic often comes with more of a scarcity mindset. So we can also lean on that.
Yeah. I was thinking adopt both and.
For sure. Thank you, Lakeisha.
I will also just lift up, establish, and use shared language. I think language is can be a barrier in so many ways, but especially when we're talking about finance and capital. So hoping that we can find shared language that really resonates with everyone.
For sure. Thank you, Charity. And I see it's Shannon. Welcome in, Shannon. I see that I wasn't sure who was under that Zoom account. So glad you're here with us. Welcome in. Awesome. So these are our community agreements, and we can keep going. I'll say a little bit about the Local Food Economy Lab, which is an initiative of the San Diego System Alliance, and focused on supporting the viability. Sorry, I'm just going to mute here. It's focused on supporting the viability of small-scale farmers, fishermen, and food business owners and workers, um, and the communities they serve in San Diego County. And it's especially focused on helping those that have been historically left out of conventional business support services, such as businesses led by Black, Indigenous, people of color, immigrants, refugees, low-income community members, among many others, that we strive to prioritize our support here. So within the lab, we have these 5 different areas in collaboration and learning. We often play a role of connecting people, bringing businesses together for collaborations, events, and shared learning opportunities, such as this workshop. And on our YouTube channel, we have all the recordings of all our previous workshops and webinars with a lot of good content there. If you would like to check it out another time, that's available. Through our business stewardship and coaching, we have our tailored business planning and coaching program that is called Pollinator, which is now open for applications to integrate our 5th cohort. A lot of the folks in the room here were or are a part of Pollinator program in previous and current cohorts. So awesome to have this group here. And we also support several businesses in a more informal, as needed way by helping them get connected with the right resources or partner organizations, letting them know about opportunities, grants through our Rhizome listserv, and try to foster this communication among the business owners. In cooperative development, we collaborate with other organizations to help build an ecosystem that is more favorable to the establishment and the success of cooperatives in our region, and more broadly, just supporting collaborative models and community governed businesses. And through our land tenure and stewardship initiative, we are now seeding the first community agricultural land trust in the region in collaboration with several local farmers and partner organizations, some of which are here with us today, and with the goal to support the community stewardship of agricultural lands in San Diego County. And then finally, community capital, we try to help businesses to access more flexible and affordable capital. as well as improve their credit score. And so if anyone here is interested in improving your credit score, we're still offering credit building loans through a lending partnership that we have. And yeah, so come talk to me after the presentation if you would like and you would be interested in that, and I'll be happy to help you. And um, that's a bit of about our work. We'll be happy to talk more with any of you after the presentation. And with all that said, I would love to formally introduce our presenter today, our new friend Charity May. We're really excited to have her joining and have this opportunity to be here today to learn together. So I'll pass it on to you, Charity, for you to introduce yourself in more detail, and lead us through this workshop.
Amazing. Thank you, Hannah. Thank you so much. As I said a little bit earlier, just I feel very honored to be in the space with you all. Um, on this slide, I've named just a couple of components that connect me to this work. I am an entrepreneur myself. I'm very much a food systems advocate by way of being a shameless foodie. Love food. I love the way that food nourishes our bodies. But I come from my background and training is in very conventional investment capital. I worked for a bank when I started out my career. But while I was working at that bank, I pursued my permaculture design certificate. So it couldn't take me away too far from the soil, which I feel so connected to. I grew up in around conventional agriculture in Ohio and have often seen the impact of that obviously on our landscapes, but then also on our food systems and on people. And so those are some of the things that are woven together that bring me to the work that I do today with Sacred Futures, which is my business practice. I focus on organizational design and leadership development, but really working with leaders, compassionate leaders that are trying to reimagine the way that we do business and that we move. And so a lot of my work has been around reimagining how capital flows, and then specifically that being focused on small businesses, food and agriculture and farming, those who are tending to our land stewardship in that way. And so those are all the pieces of myself that connect to this work and why I'm very honored to be here and in service to you all and hosting this conversation. The next slide a is an invitation for you to just reflect a little bit. When we're talking about capital and money, oftentimes these are general words, not all of the words, but general words that can come up. Profit, debt, collateral, mortgage. And I'd love for you can either just blurb it out, go off mute, or type it in the chat. What are some of the emotions that just looking at these words on the screen that it evoke in you when your first response? Scared. Yeah. Stress. Fear. Yeah. Maybe feeling overwhelmed. Yeah.
I like the mad
Discomfort.
face because there's a lot of extractive type things out there, you know.
Yes. Yes. Confusing. And I'm sorry, I didn't see who said that, but in terms of extractive measures, a lot of the system as it operates related to finance and investing. I mentioned this earlier, that language and jargon um, is one component that bars people from being able to access capital. So even the name of this workshop series, right? Capital Nourishment. How many of you were like, "Mm, what is that? Is that even possible? What does that even mean?" Like, but that's intentional because capital is to be um, a tool in service to the work that we're doing. So, yeah, I totally resonate with many of the emotions that you've raised. Maybe I'll just briefly share a little bit of my one component of my money story. And growing up low to middle income, and both of my parents choosing entrepreneurship, running small businesses more out of necessity than out of opportunity. But I learned a lot about how hard it is to bootstrap and to one positive of that I learned the hard work ethic, of course, of trying to make it happen, bootstrapping, not asking for help. But then I went into investment banking and seeing this whole financial capital market system where money was just it was being printed, it was being made up, it was hundreds of millions of dollars being spent on buying and selling small businesses in extremely extractive ways, and I it it really um, impacted me, of course, because have been committing my work and time into this field and space. Um, but I wanted to believe that there was another way, that resources could be reallocated differently. Um, and oftentimes, when you don't see it in the system, you have to step out of it and sometimes build something brand new. Um, and so, one of the things that I've been able to see in pursuing that question of like, what does it look like to reallocate resources is a whole new, or maybe not necessarily fully new, but when we talk about community capital, there are many people and organizations that are trying to figure this out. Instead of just focusing on someone's credit score, what does it look like to look at someone and see how they're a leader in their community and the work that they're doing? So character-based lending and that sort of thing. So we can move to the next slide. And I'm just going to pause for a minute. This is just a picture, but it's a picture of a river that's flowing. Um, there's still water a little farther back if you're looking at this image. If you're able to see the image, I know some of you might be moving about, but obviously the landscape around it is very lush. It's very green, and um, I don't know about you, but when I see this image, I feel drawn. If I was there, I would want to run and put my feet in the water and to feel the coolness of the water, to feel the stones underneath my feet. Maybe even roll down the grassy hill. So when I say capital nourishment, I think the original intent and purpose of specifically financial capital, but other forms of capital is to move, is to circulate, and is to flow. So you could even think about your physical body and your whole circulation system, the nourishment that is required to moving oxygen and other nutrients throughout the body. It is possible, and part of the pathway of moving to that expression of capital is understanding what its real purpose is and understanding that for your business and within your community and identifying the partners who also get that and understand that. And we still have a lot of work to do to shift hundreds of millions of dollars. But there are funding is shifting and moving. People are asking these questions. They're challenging the conventional notions and understanding of a lot of those words that were on that screen that evoke fear. To say we've got to think about a different way of moving money and also allow it to flow and not let dams keep it away from the places that it needs to go.
I wanted to share Michael or M.L. Henderson. His first thought about capital was money capital or social capital.
Yes, thank you for raising that, Lakeisha. Michael, that is a excellent distinction that capital is it is not just financial. And I would love for that to be one takeaway as well for those of you who may not be thinking about that. While we will be speaking mostly about financial capital today, when you are assessing what assets and resources that you have, it does extend beyond money. It can look like the relationships that you hold. Michael, you're mentioning social capital. There's the knowledge and expertise that you're carrying. These are all resources and assets that allow you to have agency when resourcing your business and your community, and even when seeking financial capital. So thank you for that note. Maybe I'll pause and see if there's any other comments or thoughts that are coming up before we dive into a little bit more of talking about financial capital. Okay, I will keep going. So in it's a big topic. We have just about 60 minutes to dive in. So this is going to be mostly at a high level, but hopefully giving you some really, really specific tools and ways of thinking about resourcing, specifically financial capital, but then also beyond that. So three questions I want to offer you and how you can navigate understanding capital is first really obviously knowing your business and what state your business in. We're going to get into that in a little bit. Then that can help you understand what type of capital is actually right for your business in whatever state you find your business in. And yet, I want to just underscore Sona's comment there. Please do raise your hand, unmute. Feel free to interject any time. The third question here is, what do you look for when sourcing a capital and looking for partners? So we'll dive into that in a lot more detail in the second workshop. But the start of understanding capital is understanding who is able to provide it, how do they operate, what's motivating them, and being able to identify when it's a good match for you. So we'll go into the next slide and talk a little bit more about various business states. Thank you. So you might be seeing this slide and you might be thinking that this is linear. And I'd love to see you, if you can share a response, like a react response, or raise your hand, or however. But do you resonate with the statement, like running a business, operating a farm? Is any part of that linear, or is it circular? Do you sometimes feel like you are everywhere all at once, all the time?
You literally are. It's not linear at all. There's nothing linear. There's no straight lines in my experience.
Totally validate that. I hear David saying yes. So that's a takeaway here. The state of your business can be all of these, any moment, all the time. But that being said, sometimes it's helpful to be a little bit more specific and distinct about these various stages to help you articulate with others and identify which forms of capital can unlock certain things for you. So, give you an example, right? So, for stabilizing, I like to think about that as being the state in which you are establishing your systems. You're putting certain processes in place. You are working on figuring out what does it look like to get to a break-even point or getting to a level of profitability. When your business is growing, that might be the moment where you are working to increase your reach, expanding your the number of customers or buyers, being able to source contracts, so kind of growing while you're also stabilizing. Expanding is that truly that expansion being maybe you're at a place or you're always thinking about, well, what's the next line of business or what is, if you are a farmer and there's an opportunity to increase the land that you have available, what does it look like to expand your farm operations, add a new revenue stream to your business? It could also be physical infrastructure that you need to expand and go to that next level. Maybe you've heard of these states before, but I want to underscore this fourth one being repair, because as Cynthia shared, it is so iterative. You're sometimes moving so fast, and there are moments of this work that can feel quite overwhelming if you don't know where to start. Or there are often moments where you need emergency care, whether that is your own personal capacity is limited from external circumstances, or as we all went through a global pandemic that nobody planned for, completely disrupts your operations. What do you do? Where do you go if a contract just falls away when you were planning and preparing to grow and expand based on that contract and it's no longer there? Or weather and climate that we have no control over, drought, political instability, a consistent one that is wreaking havoc in our communities and likely touching many businesses, especially small businesses. So, repair is also a really important piece of understanding the full picture of your business and knowing that capital should also be available to support you in repairing your business alongside stabilizing, growing, and expanding. Congratulations, Michael, on completing your startup phase and moving into stabilization. That's really exciting. Before I move on, how is this resonating with um, with you? Is there anyone that wants to share a comment or a thought?
I can jump in.
Yeah,
Can you
welcome.
turn on the chat box?
No.
Is that Mim?
Yeah.
Yes, please.
Okay. So I run a nonprofit, but we're also, I'm going to call us farmers, but we're growers. We grow vegetable seedlings to empower food insecure folks to grow their own food. We have a bunch of programs that we are transitioning into a revenue stream. So fee for service and getting away from relying on grants because of a lot of things you just spoke about.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to jump in and say, like, that's my perspective coming into this learning opportunity with you. And I hope it'll be a good fit for me.
Mhm. Well, thank you for saying that. When I realize I'm probably using the term business a lot more, and maybe enterprise would be a little bit more holistic in terms of thinking a nonprofit operation is absolutely you're operating, you're running an enterprise, you need to receive funds to come in to fund your operations, and then there's other ways that capital is moving and flowing outwards. So whether your goal is to make a profit or just to nourish your day-to-day operations, this definitely is applicable in all of those ways.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Yeah.
I just wanted to share this with Cynthia again. I was thinking about the repairing part. And sometimes that repairing is not what you think it might be. It might be, fixing a piece of equipment, but it could also be adjusting operations, change of hours, staffing, okay, this person is not working out. Those are also, I think, soft areas of repair that may not look like what that is, you know? So it's like
Yeah.
a operations check-in and correction or adjustment almost all the time.
Yeah.
I was thinking similar thoughts that it's where we pivot. We constantly have to pivot.
Yeah.
And this is Michael, my first time on. I'm enjoying it. When I look at the stabilizing, growing, expanding, repairing, I just smile. It looks like you don't have to be alone on a journey. It looks like the 3 to 5 year business plan, step by step, the process, which excites me.
That's wonderful to hear. Thank you all. I want to move to the next slide because we're diving in a little bit deeper into those three questions, right, related to understanding capital. So what stage is your business in? And I think we've come kind of generally agree that it is quite iterative. And let's see, I think it's slide 11. Yeah. Great. Thanks, Hannah. So this is a big question, and you'll see an iteration of this slide when we go into some of the scenarios. But this question of what capital is right for my business, operation, nonprofit, I've shared 4 general categories. Those categories are the 4 solid colors down here. There are grants, which many of you are very familiar with. You have applied for grants, you received them. There is loans. There are loans, debt capital. Some of the examples that are here are in the blue. There's equity, and equity being an investment that someone is making in exchange for future economic interest or future profit without requiring, day-to-day payment, which just throwing this out there, nonprofits can hold equity in other ventures, but that's 201 if anyone's interested in that. But I also name here surplus as well. So for those, in the nonprofit sense, that would be building up a cash reserve, right? Because you're investing your funds back into the operation. But for any food and agriculture related business, your desire and goal is to be able to expand and move beyond break even point. And what having profits can actually do for your business, whether that's reinvesting them, building out a reserve fund for challenges in the future, or allowing those funds to support your efforts in obtaining other forms of capital, whether that's loans or equity. So the different, maybe I'll just go into this a little bit more. But the grants here, I wanted to just make a distinction of the different types of grants that you might receive, whether it's public or private. But government grants, obviously, they're very, they can be quite extensive in terms of the process and applying for them. You might find matching grants in the private sector with private foundations, but there's also in-kind donations, folks who can receive stocks or bonds or equipment, other forms of donations also being a source of capital. On the loan side, what the distinction I want to make here, and we'll go into more specific examples, is that generally loans can be categorized based on the length of the arrangement. So short-term loans, two examples here is a line of credit. Think of like a credit card, but not at 25% interest. But a line of credit is something that especially for working capital, you can borrow, draw down some funds, but then you repay it as you can. But it's available to you on an ongoing basis. That's different than a term loan, which is typically they provide, uh, let's say it's 3 to 7 years, but you receive the money up front, and then you're making consistent payments on that loan over the life of that term. A purchase order financing is another form of short-term financing that you might hear about or come across if you have, um, let's say, and we'll get into this example a little bit later, but if you have a buyer or some sort of an invoice or contract that you would like to use to borrow against. So the example being, you've got 10,000 pounds of whatever produce, or let's say if you run a fishery business and you have someone who wants to buy those 10,000 pounds, let's say it's $15,000 worth of value for that particular invoice, a lender can provide, let's say, up to 80%. They will allow you to borrow against that one invoice up to 80%. And it's very short term because you'll receive payment from your buyer, let's say within 90 days. And that would allow you to pay that purchase order down, but it allows you to get that capital up front to be able to fulfill the order. Um, I then examples for related to equity. Um, a couple that I've named here, and we'll get into an example of a community investment note. So one of the things I hope that you could take away is that your community, other business owners, other folks who might be patrons to your operation or your initiative or project, there are creative ways that they can support you in providing a capital. And one of those is maybe you've heard of crowdfunding. It's a form of community investment where there's a promise that later down the road, you might share some of your profits with those who are investing in your operation upfront. Let's see. I'll pause there because we're going to get into some examples, and definitely during the examples, I would love if you have questions or comments to jump in related to that. But at a high level, these are some really specific examples of the different types of capital that are available within those core budget buckets. The next slide is addressing that third question. So we talked about what state of business am I in? I'm in all these states, but like what part of my business do I feel like I'm a little stable in? And then I'm trying to expand and looking for partners, and I need to focus on repair in this particular area. We talked about the different types of capital. When it comes to finding finding the right type of capital for your business, I'll quickly just state even the slide before. Unfortunately, there's no one capital provider that provides all of those types, right? We often are talking to multiple organizations, multiple banks to figure out what type of capital can they provide, and that absolutely can feel really exhausting. So what I want to talk about here is giving you a little bit more of a framework of understanding the flavor of the different types of capital providers. I'm making a distinction between providers and partners because you will often likely need both. But the distinction for partners is that they are coming alongside you. They have structured themselves, whether it's a community bank, a CDF, a community development financial institution, CDFI, or a nonprofit charitable fund. They are working to be as flexible, as resourceful as possible. They're the ones that might say, that might be able to. There are some what we call integrated capital providers where they will look for a grant partner to come alongside their loan and support you in bringing those two forms of capital together to resource your business. They are going to be thinking about patient ways. So let's say you're negotiating the terms for a term loan and you're not comfortable with the monthly principal payments for a 3-year term. Working, being patient and working to see, can we actually extend our term and give you a 5-year term or even longer to allow to support your ability to pay the loan back. And they're looking to be creative. Capital providers are are your conventional banks, more transactional. They have a standard checklist that they need you to fill out and to sign for. They might be more time sensitive and a little bit more rigid in how they are looking to share capital with you. They're going to be really focused on their risk position. How do I know? This is what the capital provider might be asking. How do I know that I will get my, my funding back, or you'll be able to pay me back? Other other areas where there can be a distinction when you're looking for the right source of capital are these four general buckets and that I have in the center here. So using an example, the cost being the cost of capital being the interest rate. Let's use a loan, for example, the interest rate that you might be asked to pay. There might be a capital provider who can move really fast. They can provide you $10,000 tomorrow, but at 20% interest. There might be other capital providers or partners who, lower interest rate, but it might take a little bit more time because they want to get to know you. They're working through a more character-based approach. Might be 3 months or even longer. I mentioned term. The length of the funding can vary. But I wanted to name here service. And what I mean by service, I mean the customer service. Your experience of sourcing capital matters. I don't know. I'm sure that the resourcing that you're receiving from San Diego Food System Alliance underscores this as well. But if there's anything that I want you to take away and take into the next workshop that we talk about, where we're talking about sourcing, is knowing that you have agency. When you are looking to receive capital into your business, I don't care if you're a grantee, if you're looking to borrow, or if you're looking for investment partners, you are not begging. It is an opportunity for someone to partner with you in the work and the viability of your business and operation, how it's nourishing your family, you and your family and your community. You're also building an enterprise. One thing I want to take away you to take away here too is that the journey of capital oftentimes can feel like moving from a project or a concept to an established enterprise. And there's going to be a flow of different types of capital that facilitate that for you, right? So when you're starting out, you need a lot of risk-free, hands-off, unsecured, like just give me the money, give me the grant, let me establish it, let me put the business operation in place, let me prove to you that I can, find the customers, um I can, grow the produce, all of those things. But then you start is getting more stable and establishing. And now you need larger dollars for infrastructure, for a refrigerated truck, for buying a building, looking for land. So on that journey, part of understanding the capital is, part of understanding the capital is recognizing that journey and knowing how to communicate that when you are connecting with various providers and partners. Yeah, man, thanks for raising that. Yeah, capital has a responsibility to give the customer user the best experience possible. I would love to ask, um, before we get into, I'm going to get into an example, and then we're going to go a little bit more in detail on some specific capital types. But would anyone like to just share briefly an example, or have you encountered this distinction between someone who felt like a capital partner? It can be, again, it can be a grantor, it can be a lender, regardless of the capital type. But have you actually experienced the distinction between what I'm describing related to capital providers and capital partners? What was that like for you?
For me, I filled out, uh, applied for a grant I didn't really understand, and it turned out to be Kitchens for Good. I wasn't used to the capital partner part, and that was a learning experience, a beautiful one at that. Um, I was thinking about the money, but the it was money. It was much more than what I would ask for if I was in another area of capital providers. So it wasn't the money; it was the collaboration, the resources, opportunities, coaching, um, things that capital providers couldn't provide. Capital partners had just what I needed at the time.
I'm so grateful to hear you had that experience, Michael. Thank you.
I mean, I can state the obvious of working with a federal grant and having that be mostly reporting, I'd say, is the most cumbersome part of that. Actually, applying, obviously not that simple either, but in the long run, reporting is the most rigid part of that. But I guess I also want to say, because I'm inspired by Michael, that like right now I'm working with the EPA, so federal and state. And state is just the opposite. They are looking to find ways to support us because they love what we're doing. Whereas federal is just like we're a number. We just have to follow all the rules. But state is like going out of their way, pushing me, just like you were saying, Michael. We did not spend down all the money, and they're forcing us to take the money and find creative ways. They are finding creative ways for us to, because I was just very frugal with the money and I just made it go a long way and I didn't need as much as we thought we needed. And it's like getting another grant. They are finding very creative ways for us to make sure that we get every penny to spend. So it can even be a government grant that is more of a partner than just a provider.
That's great to hear. Thank you for sharing.
Yep. I'll just go with my just real briefly. Capital providers and those grants that Nim is talking about, they tend to be extremely transactional. It is about the reporting. You're always in reports, reports, reports before you get the program off the ground. It's like, can I do some work now? Because all of this is, it tends to be disconnects you from the work almost. So I'm really trying to put myself in circles and actually create something that speaks to all of this with shared risk and the resourcing and that. And Charity, I'd love to get at you at some time after these workshops to talk about that, because there are groups that are working on it. So yeah.
Thank you. Yes. It they're only scratching the surface. There's so much more work to be done, but yeah, it is so crucial. And I appreciate what you were saying in terms of the government funding at times can work on both sides of that. 'Cause I know of of growers and ranchers who in various states have had completely distinctly different experiences with FSA and sourcing their loan. So yeah, unfortunately, it's not as consistent at times, but it's the same thing to say with lenders as well, and even investors with on the I should say private foundations, just any capital source. At the end of the day, you are connecting and working with people behind that. So looking for those that sense when partnering with them is important. I'm going to move to the next slide, Hannah, if you don't mind, and um, give you an example. Now, this is a real business, but I've stripped away any specific names and all of that. But this is a real business that um, had a really creative blended capital stack. They were operating in every single stage, which I'm going to talk about in just a minute. Um, and was on a journey, was on a journey. So this was primarily the structure of the business was agritourism, family farm business, I believe, first generation farmers. And at the time that my work interacted with them, they were looking to expand from 5 acres to 35 acres. There was another plot of land down the road that they wanted that came onto the market, and they wanted to. So they're in the Midwest, business operations quite seasonal. So the bulk of their revenues were coming from running this farm to table from I believe it was May through November, right? And so obviously their farming practices, what they were growing, tied into that experience. They were also looking to stabilize by diversifying their revenue stream. So they were experimenting with CSA farm stand alongside they had a vision for being able to actually host stays on the site. So think Airbnb, VRBO, again, expanding their agritourism. The repair component for this particular story was that the financing that they initially were looking at for this new piece of land, the terms were initially they looked okay, right? It was a 10-year note. But there was a bullet payment at the end. And the the if you could imagine, it's nice to have decent, consistent monthly payments, but this looming sense that there was going to be this large, like tens of thousands of dollars, really hundreds of thousands of dollars, that would come due at the end, was kind of wearing on them. So wanting to think creatively about how do we remove a little bit of that burden, while doing all of these other pieces. So through the partnership of a nonprofit charitable loan fund, a private foundation that was in or I should say, a community foundation in the region that was focused on agriculture, food and agriculture. There was about $25,000 to $50,000 of grants, but those grants were specifically for supporting the stabilizing piece of the business. So in order for this family to know where and how to diversify their revenues, they needed to do some in-depth analysis of their sales historically, which their reporting needed to be cleaned up, then to also help them project and look in the future. And I know some of you have expressed, some of you have support, financial management support, and others have expressed the need for that as well. That is a big component of being able to know what type of capital would be helpful. But grant funding was really supportive for them and being able to get that resource to really help them know what their numbers were and then project forward and actually run different scenarios to determine what new revenue stream would make sense and when to do that revenue stream. As you can imagine, expanding the farm operations from 5 acres to 35 would require a phased approach to get to revenue generation, but then also capital infrastructure. So there were some buildings that were on site that they were going to repair and make available for the on-farm stays, but that requires construction financing of some kind. So I'm jumping around a little bit, but that's part of what the working capital loan supported them on. And I believe, the working capital loan, there was a long period in terms of how it was structured. There was a long period of interest-only payments that were required before they needed to make principal payments. And then the $300,000 funding for the land purchase, as I mentioned, they had a mortgage loan. They were already negotiating and putting that in place. But with this idea that there was going to be this balloon payment, they wanted to think creatively about how do we reduce the amount of mortgage financing that is required. And so they coordinated with, I believe it was a lawyer, but then also with other resources, had the creative idea to actually invite their patrons, those who were participating in the farm to table experience, other family members, to participate in a community investment round. And it was very successful. So the way that the mortgage loan alongside the community investment note worked was that it was open-ended. They could, so for whatever community member wanted to invest $1,000, $10,000, and note that they're structured as an LLC, so it was not a corporation. They were not issuing shares. Very simple, basic. But they're kind of the economic interest that they were promising their community was to be funded much later down the road when they would look to refinance the mortgage loan and get the land appraised. With obviously with the land being appraised, there would be a likely increase in value. But it was open-ended. So the idea was that they could continue to raise capital from their community and continue to reduce the amount of the mortgage loan that they had in place, which while also communicating with other lenders and thinking creatively about their blended capital stack. I share that to say a lot of moving parts. It might sound complex, and there are components that are complex, but with the right partners and the creative energy, it is totally possible. Um, and and you can think about all of these, again, these different sources of capital flowing, ebbing and flowing in and out of the business as needed based on the different states that the business is in. Um, I'll pause there because I know that was maybe a lot, and I wanted to give a high level. But any questions for clarity that would be helpful on this example? Okay, I'm gonna keep going. So next few slides, and I might, just in the interest of time, I might skip a couple, but um, with the example that I just shared, this is a visual of looking at what does blended capital, and again, right now, just talking about financial capital, um, helping you think through, again, the different types of capital that can be really resourceful for what you have, thinking about the asset that you're building, and then what you need. So this example being multifunction, community food focused operation. You're growing food, you want to build infrastructure to be able to process, to build a value added product on site. You need to expand your land and build out the infrastructure for that. You also have, you need to expand your operations and hire staff. So, what blend of capital would really support you in facilitating all of those things? I mentioned the example of the community investment note, that coming alongside acquisition financing. If you were to have let's say it's a conventional loan through FSA or a bank finance loan. Oftentimes for acquisition financing, you might have a capital provider who will ask for the land to be collateral in that place. There are some capital partners who are trying to take do things a little bit differently and be more creative about providing capital without requiring certain extractive measures, such as collateral as a form of a personal guarantee or other things like that. Um, and then obviously we have all different forms of grants highlighted here. Because there are different components of this larger scale project that would likely allow you to access different forms of grants. I also wanted to name that sometimes the loan financing can serve as a bridge to sourcing the government grants and funding, and maybe some of you have experienced that before, but you can always think about pairing different forms of capital in that way. Let's see. Let's go. Yes, to the next one, Hannah. Right. This is the example of the purchase order financing. I gave a little bit more detail earlier. If you have like the asset being that you have a buyer or a retailer that is interested in a large volume amount of whatever your product is or your produce or what have you at a scale, and they are able to, share or work towards providing an invoice or a purchase order to make that purchase. That is something that you can take to some financing partners and seek purchase order financing for. What this will allow you to do is take the value. I use the example of 80% of the value of that invoice. Typically, that this process of financing is shorter time frame, so you can get the funding sooner. And that funding would allow you to invest in the working capital to fulfill those orders. Um, and then once that invoice is paid by the buyer, you can then repay the lender for that financing. And Sona's raising that California Farm Link um, does support purchase order financing. Thank you for naming that, Sona. The next example is looking at equipment financing. This one is really straightforward. The example here is you have a distribution operation and you need cold chain capacity for transportation. So that could be a combination of or either or. You need cold storage on your site or at the site that you're distributing your produce to, or you'd like a refrigerated truck. Oftentimes, with machinery and equipment, sometimes the manufacturers will provide equipment financing. I would say often it's very like straightforward, transactional. They're definitely going to be a capital provider, but could be an avenue alongside pursuing various grants that would also support um, value-added processing and other equipment related to that. But equipment financing is a great tool for specific assets that you would be seeking to purchase. So always ask the manufacturer if they have financing available, and if not, there are lenders and banks that do provide that type of financing as well. I'll go to the next one here. And this is an example of for a catering business. Let's say that you're wanting to expand a little bit, and you need a dedicated kitchen space with additional equipment and need to work through the permitting process for that. Um, this is where a term loan, let's say anywhere from 3 years to 7 years, might be really a good fit, a good match alongside perhaps equipment financing. So you get the lump sum funding up front, um, ideally, and collaborating, working with the lender to figure out what a healthy monthly debt service payment would be. I will say with term loans, oftentimes it's the balance of looking at your historical cash flows to understand your business operations alongside where your projected or future cash flows will be coming from. Because obviously, if you are operating a catering business and now you have more space, now you have more capacity, that is a component of the business. You're going to generate more revenues that the term loan should account for and allow you to support being able to pay back in that way. Those are, again, high level examples, hopefully some relevant, giving you a flavor again of not just, all loans are extractive or all equity doesn't make sense, but rather there are really specific tools within those buckets that can support you on the journey and unlocking the next stage that you need for your business operation. I want to now talk as we're coming to the end here. Oh, I do have another one. I'm gonna pass on this one, Hannah. That's okay. Yeah, I want to just touch on a couple of things that you need to know when we're talking about capital readiness. And many of you may already be quite familiar with a lot of these points. But wanted to share these in the slide form so you can always refer back to it. And for any level of capital readiness, the more familiar you are with your profit and loss statement, your revenues coming in, and your expenses going out, understanding what is your break-even point, how much revenues you need to generate to cover all of your expenses and then beyond. Getting a sense of being able to estimate in the future where new opportunities might be generating cash flow for you over a period of time. And articulating that story in terms of what your bank statements are saying about your business or enterprise will always be helpful in preparing for capital readiness. The next slide is an example, yeah, for purchase order financing. A couple things to take away and remember. Do you have a written purchase order or some form of a contract, or even sometimes you can start that conversation if you have an indication of interest to start that conversation with a funder. Um, Understanding what your funders, and understanding what your buyer's payment terms are and how much it will cost you to fulfill that order. Those are the core things that you would need to understand for this type of financing to work for you. The next one is generally just about business loans. Again, there's different types of business loans, but for you to really, I think many of you shared just a little bit of apprehension, understanding. We're getting to understand what is your comfort level in terms of taking on a form of debt, a form of business loan. So the best way to get to that is really getting a sense of what monthly loan payment are you comfortable with absorbing on top of your monthly business expenses, and running an exercise to figure out, after your operating expenses, how much of that available. That will tell you whether or not you're ready to take on debt oftentimes, and then how much is typically the way that you can get a sense of if it would be a good fit for you. The other piece I'll name here too is collateral, or what type of asset you might have that would support that loan, whether it's the equipment, as is the case with equipment financing, or you have inventory or vehicles. This varies by the capital provider and capital partner. As I mentioned, most conventional capital providers, like say you're looking to acquire land, they will want to take the land for collateral, but there are other creative funders that are trying to rewrite those rules, which I think is just really important to highlight. We don't have enough of them that are changing those rules, but this is definitely an area that you can ask questions about and quiz the folks that you will talk to figure out what you're comfortable with and what makes sense going forward. The next slide, I think I already addressed a little bit, but just in terms of your looking to access funding for land acquisition. And oftentimes there's a lot of different sources of capital that you're pulling together to acquire that land. So one concept that ties to the community investment note is the question of, do you want to explore shared ownership models, community investment note, and community land trust as well? So these are a couple of things for you to be mindful of. I have another slide on community investment. I think the main takeaway here is really just assessing your community. Is this something, is the project or the expansion of your business, does it, at this stage in time, right? It may not be a good fit, but at this stage in time, would it make sense to bring that community of supporters alongside you in building the next iteration of your business and collaborating with community investment? My next slide is getting to something that Michael brought up a little bit earlier, related to beyond financial capital. I would love to encourage everyone to think about you all hold capital. Capital, maybe another term that's in the finance world is assets, but there is value that you hold, that you carry, that that whether if it's collaborating and pulling those things together with others, can unlock further opportunity and further resources. So these are a few examples of what that could look like. Resource sharing, especially if you are in a similar sector or industry, farming, fishery, restaurant catering. If there are ways in which you can share your resources, that is a way of thinking about capital that goes beyond just another grant application, or loan funding. And there's also specific funding that can support these models of resource sharing as well. Mutual aid, I think, comes along with thinking about if you get to a place where you have surplus, or you already have surplus and other components, of being able to support each other in more informal funding circles and barter and trade exchanges. These are models that have been around probably since the beginning of time, before we had financial capital markets that were as extractive as they were. So it's always good just to remember that collaboration and community care is possible even today, and even among our small businesses. That is the end of the educational component of this workshop.
Thank you all so much for coming. And thank you, Charity, for all your amazing experience shared here today.